with Jane Dutton. Tonight, another commission into South African affairs, this time on state capture and the shadowy parallel state. After the failed Marikana Commission and the arms deal inquiry, we asked if this one can be any different. Is there true value in these commissions, or is it just a waste of time and money? That's my question to my panel tonight. What's yours? Our phone lines are open. You can phone in on 011-759-6340 or tweet us on #Tonight with Jane Dutton. But first, Shahan has the top stories.
All right, thanks for that, Jane. We know you'll be delving into the state capture inquiry, so these are the other top stories of the day. Convicted murderer Henry van Breda is heading to the Supreme Court of Appeal. High Court Judge Siraj Desai denied his application for leave to appeal his 3 life sentences. The 23-year-old was convicted of killing his mother, father and brother with an axe. His sister Mali survived the attack, but she doesn't remember the events of that fateful night and was later diagnosed with amnesia. Van Breda told the court that an axe-wielding intruder dressed in dark clothing was behind the attacks.
The applicant's counsel, Mr. P. Botha, has not advanced any compelling reason why the appeal should be heard. Instead, he argued that the appeal would have a reasonable prospect of success.
Kanyamazane residents in Mpumalanga are demanding to meet President Cyril Ramaphosa. Premier Refiloe Mtsweni was expected to address them, but after a community meeting, they refused to listen to her. Residents want government to rebuild their homes, which were damaged by hailstorms in May.
As the ANC in the province, we understand the plight of the people of Kanyamazane, but we believe in dialogue. The Premier and the ANC leadership wanted to go to meet them and discuss with them and fix the issues of Kanyamazane. But they refused to discuss with the Premier or to have a meeting with the Premier and the leadership of the ANC, because I was part of that meeting with the community and that of the councillors of Kanyamazane.
And there are calls for the ANC to disband its Northwest Provincial Executive Committee. The ANC National Working Committee is in the province to meet with the PEC. At the weekend, the province's chairperson, Supra Mahumapelo, was booed by some ANC members. Years of mismanagement under his premiership led to violent protests. It forced government to place the province under administration. The party says the Northwest remains a key province in the national elections.
This meeting must get reports. On the basis of that report, the NWC on its own must then say, based on these reports and the evidence that we have now about the state of the organization, what remedial action, what help do we need to do politically, and the decision we need to take to help the organization to be strengthened, to stabilize.
Those are the headlines. It's back to Jane.
Thanks very much for that, Shahan. Another commission of inquiry is playing out in the country. Former President Jacob Zuma and the Gupta family are the main players, even though they won't be making a presence. So what's the point? And especially since these commissions haven't had much success in the past. Since 1994, we've seen numerous commissions play out. The most famous include the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the Seriti Commission that investigated the arms deal, the Farlam inquiry into the Marikana massacre, and last year's commission into the feasibility of free higher education. They're extremely costly, lengthy and political in nature. There's also been problems around publicly releasing the findings of these inquiries. And even after all of that, the state is not obliged to act on the recommendations made by these bodies. So, do commissions make a difference? These are some of the questions we'll be tackling tonight. And of course, get in touch with us and you can ask questions of my guests. Here with me in the studio is political analyst Prince Mashele. Kasix Lawson Naidu joins me live from our Cape Town studio, and joining me from Durban is the ANC's Carl Niehaus. Welcome, all three of you. Carl Niehaus, what's the point of this commission?
Well, I think the issue is that many people have asked for the state capture problem to be investigated. Now we've got an opportunity for it to be investigated. You must understand that there had been many allegations But at the end of the day, as you've referred to the problem of other commissions and the fact that sometimes it seems that not much comes out of it, the question is about the quality of the evidence that will be brought in front of that commission. If it is simply allegations, and we seem to have a situation where there have been many allegations without too much substance, and interestingly enough, we heard that one of the people who spoke a lot about anti-corruption, Mr. Pravin Gordhan, said that he actually doesn't have anything to say about former President Zuma and that he is actually not approaching the Commission to give evidence. So the question starts arising to what extent the quality of the evidence that will be brought in front of this Commission will in fact help us to understand the issue of state capture any better. And beyond that, the next question that we must ask is, isn't this Commission too narrow? Should we only be looking at one particular family, the Gupta family? Should we only be looking at former President Jacob Zuma? In both instances, I would argue that yes, of course, there should be an investigation into the Gupta family. There had been many allegations. But at the same time, there should be an investigation into the role of big business and the capturing of the state by big business in South Africa, which would include the Oppenheimers. It would include many other big businesses, including Investec, Bidvest. We can continue to mention that long list of businesses that clearly have a huge influence on the state and over decades
Mr. Niehaus, which we will touch a little bit later, but I do want to continue talking about how valid the validity of these kind of commissions, these hearings. Lawson Naidoo, I mean, what point do you think they could make at the moment? And is, as what Mr. Niehaus said, is the investigation key here, the witnesses?
Well, you know, let's recollect that this Commission of Inquiry has arisen as a result of an investigation by the Public Protector, which produced the State of Capture report in November 2016. And there was a lot of evidence that was presented to Advocate Madonsela when she conducted this inquiry. She didn't have the resources to do justice to the investigation, and she therefore recommended that a full Judicial Commission of Inquiry be established with full powers of search and summoning witnesses and documents so that they could get to the bottom of the problem of state capture in South Africa. And I think, you know, when we look at the value of commissions of inquiry, as you've pointed out, they make recommendations, and it's really a question of political will about wanting to implement those recommendations. With regards to the Marikana Commission, it's been the inability of the NPA to institute prosecutions against the police officers involved. It's not the problem of the Folham Commission itself. It's really about political will and the capacity of state organs to execute their constitutional functions. And I think as South Africans who've been deeply affected by state capture, we need to ensure that this Commission of Inquiry does in fact meet its mandate and that real action is taken against the culprits and that we begin to recoup some of the money that was misappropriated from the public purse.
All right, Prince Mashele, can this Commission do something different? I mean, surely it must have learned something from the past mistakes of other commissions.
Look, we've got to be very careful. We must not be dismissive of all commissions because we have been disappointed by one or two. It is actually not true that post-apartheid commissions in South Africa have been useless. Let me give you practical examples. There was a Ginwala Commission. People tend to forget that. One of the findings of that Ginwala Commission was that Menzies Milana, the then head of the NPA, was not fit to hold office. What happened to Menzies Milana? He was struck off the roll. As we speak, he has been struck off the roll. That was an outcome of a commission. Number two, there was a commission that looked at the fitness of Pikoli to hold office. What happened? He was not found guilty by that commission. Of course, there was a negotiated settlement, but the commission's finding was that he was actually fit and proper to hold office. Let me jump to the Fees Must Fall Commission. Although it was instituted by a president who is not liked, someone I don't like myself, Jacob Zuma, one of the findings of the commission was that something must be done about fees. Jacob Zuma a day before he was kicked out as the ANC president, what did he do? He announced that students belonging to a particular category would receive free education. As we speak, they do. So a picture must not be painted that commissions are wholly not of value in South Africa. The Marikana Commission, it did a good work, but the NPA did not act. The Seriti Commission was a whitewash, that commission. Let me jump to this particular commission, which is the State Capture Commission. Mm-hmm. Contrary to popular opinion, I think this commission will work. Let me give you reasons why I think it will work. Number one, Duduzane Zuma has already been charged even before the commission said. He has already been charged by courts. His fate is now in the hands of judges. We don't know what the judges will do with him. That's number one. Number two, the man who made sure that the NPA does not act, Jacob Zuma, is now confined to Nkandla. There is a different man in the union buildings. The motives of that man in the union buildings, I just cannot see any reason why he would protect Jacob Zuma. I think he wants to paint himself as Mr. Clean. So he will make sure that the findings of the commission are acted upon. Lastly, the judge who is heading the commission, he knows that Jacob Zuma is out. Possibly he could be appointed the next Chief Justice after Mukhweng. I think he's going to do a pretty good job. So I'm very optimistic about this specific one because of the particular political circumstances.
Okay, the State Security Agency, many of them haven't been given the clearance to investigate. A lot of people are frustrated with Cyril Ramaphosa for this. Lawson Naidoo, what's the problem there?
Well, it seems that the State Security Agency are really dragging their feet over processing the security clearance applications for the investigating team that the Deputy Chief Justice has put together, and he expressed his frustrations today. And we certainly hope that President Ramaphosa will intervene himself to ensure that this is speeded up, that the security clearances are processed, so that the investigators can begin the daunting task that faces them. We know that there are reams and reams of documents that they have to go through, witness statements that will have to be looked at, evidence that will have to be found. So there's a huge amount of work, and this delay is really unacceptable. You know, it's almost 6 months since the commission was established, and we're only now today had the first public hearing. So, you know, this lack of cooperation from state entities is really unacceptable. And we know that there have also been issues with the funding of the commission, but that seems to have been resolved now. But you know, the commission needs the support of all state entities and all South Africans if it's going to be successful, as Prince Mashele said.
And Carl Niehaus, I mean, the Marikana cost 150,000 million, the arms deal nearly 140 million. I mean, considering that it's costing us taxpayers and we possibly get very little back, is it worth it? Is it worth it if we're just opening up a conversation anyway?
Well, I think it's critical that the allegations that have been made with regards to former President Zuma, the allegations of state capture, should be properly tested. I was interested that Judge Zondo today said that there was a paucity of people coming forward with evidence and preparedness to give evidence. Now, that doesn't bode well for the outcome of this commission. It could mean two things. On the one hand, that people are holding back, but I suspect on the other hand that it is easy to make allegations, but it is far more difficult to bring that allegations onto the spotlight of a commission and make them stand. I've got my serious doubts if the evidence that will be given by someone like Faiki Mento, who I believe is seriously challenged in terms of her own mental health, will stand the proper test of the commission. I think we must also ask ourselves if Mcebisi Yunus's evidence, with his own checkered background in the Eastern Cape, will stand. And then there's Mr. James Maseko. You know, Mr. Maseko claimed that he lost his job because he actually refused to assist the Guptas.
Carl Niehaus, I'm sorry, I'm going to just jump in here very quickly. Sorry, excuse me interrupting you. We've got somebody on the line, Spiwe, and we just don't want to lose you from Newcastle. Go ahead, Spiwe.
Yes, Jane. How are you doing with your guest?
Very good, thank you. Go ahead, Spiwe.
Yes, I'm going to be brief and precise. My worry is when we talk about state capture, we all know that the state is three-armed. But we are here talking about investigating the Guptas and President Zuma alone. Because you must broaden the scope. You must go to all the municipalities, all the departments in this country. And two, the second thing that I want to put on your table, Jane, is that why are we dealing with the state capture now instead of dealing with the state capture before 1994? Because those two things, they leave a question mark in this country. What is going on exactly? Is it because there is one man that is being targeted, which is President Zuma, or is it because we want to deal with corruption entirely in the country? Thanks a lot, Jane.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Prince Mashele, would you
Well, I think the question that Sipho is making goes to the point that Kalini House has already made earlier on. Most of the people who are calling for this to be broadened, they want the focus of the commission to be diluted so that those who have done wrongdoing with specific reference to the daily activities of the Guptas in South Africa can actually disappear. That's the crux of the matter, and we have to face that. So they want to throw a smoke and talk about 1652, pre-1994. I mean, if we were to have a commission like that, you wouldn't, and you would actually investigate until the Lord returns. There is a specific thing that was done by a specific bunch of people who came from India, captured our state institutions. We are dealing with ESCOM now that has collapsed. We are dealing with Transnet that has collapsed. So if anybody wants another state commission to look at what has happened since 1652, well and good, it can be done. But let's finish this specific business. And I think this commission must be given space to do its work. The question of the paucity of evidence, remember that this was day one. We don't know how many people are still going to come forward with evidence. So we must not jump into conclusion even before the commission does its work. Lastly, we must be very careful to discredit witnesses or people who have evidence. Who are we to say Mcebisi Jonas is discredited? Because if we were to go into our personal circumstances, Kalini House himself is discredited. He is firmly in the pocket of the former president, Jacob Zuma. So he himself, by the way, has got skeletons in his own big closet. So we really have to be careful, because if we are not, we'll actually be throwing mud when actually we ourselves... Exactly.
Let's bring in Lindani from Midstream. Go ahead, Lindani.
Hi, Ms. Bunton.
Hello.
Yes. What I want to contribute is around the nature of the commissions that are being convened. The nature of the commissions that are being convened are specifically targeting certain families, and they do not cast the net wider to include the multiplicity of other families in South Africa. Right now, we are talking about a commission on state capture that is implicating the family of Zuma and implicating the Guptas. Yet, we are not actually emphasizing the fact that the state capture is continuing now as we speak. President Ramaphosa has given contract to the family friends. Do you know that? At ESCOM, he's capturing ESCOM.
Okay,
you are silent. Mashele is silent on that.
Okay, Mr. Lindani.
I can answer. What Lindani is saying is not true, is a lie. There is no contract that Ramaphosa has given to anybody at ESCOM. He says a contract. He will not tell you specifically a contract on what. Look, I'm not a spokesperson for Ramaphosa. I mean, people who follow my work will know that I'm critical of Ramaphosa. But I love the truth. Even if the truth is against a person I don't like, Lindani is lying on a public platform, and we must say that is lying. Which contract? He's lying.
And as you're saying, the commission now is focusing on state capture and those protagonists. I just wonder from you, Mr. Naidu, if a commission is the right way to go ahead. I mean, shouldn't we rather see legal proceedings in the court? Wouldn't that be a lot more effective? Get the prosecutions that are desperately needed?
Well, absolutely, and there's no reason why these two processes can't continue in parallel. We already know that Duduzane Zuma, for example, has been charged with corruption in relation to the alleged bribe that was offered to Nkebisi Jonas. We know that the NPA are pursuing criminal charges in relation to the Estina Dairy Farm project in the Free State. And the terms of reference of this Commission of Inquiry make it very clear. The terms of reference of the Commission make it very clear that
Go ahead, Mr. Naidu. There's a horrible delay.
Sorry. That the Commission has the authority to refer prosecutions to the National Prosecuting Authority. And once the evidence is there, the organs of state need to take over and prosecute those cases. They don't need to wait until the end of the Commission. As soon as evidence is available, they need to do so. And this has been part of the problem of state capture, is that institutions of state were hollowed out during the Zuma administration, the NPA in particular, the Hawks, and so on. So those institutions need to be given back the capacity to be able to do their jobs effectively, to prosecute these cases where there is evidence, so that, as I said earlier, those that are implicated can be prosecuted and if found guilty, go to jail, and also that the state needs to be able to recoup some of that money, the many billions of rands that were siphoned off the public purse during this rampage of state capture that we saw in the last few years of the Zuma administration.
It's because Carl Niehaus, even though the KPMGs and the McKenzies admitted to wrongdoing, the politicians are linked to them, nothing's happened there, no money has come back from these organizations who've apologized. Are we ever going to be able to get that money back? Carl Niehaus?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. There's a long delay.
I was talking about
Well, I hope that money can... I hope really that money, if there is money that had been misappropriated, can be found back. But at the same time, I want to make it very clear that I disagree with the point that says that concentrating only on the Guptas and on President Zuma is the correct thing to do now. It is wrong. We must concentrate on state capture in general, and the worst criminals in terms of state capture, the people who have done the greatest damage to South Africa with regards to state capture, are those who sit in the big white monopoly capital companies. And this commission, if it is not going to deal with that, will not give us a full picture of what state capture is all about, and we will have to investigate the issue further. Saying that does not mean that I do not want the Guptas to be investigated, that I do not want anyone who may be responsible for wrongdoing investigated. But we have to deal with investigations in a historical context that in fact reveal the true reality about state capture.
Okay,
By
Prince
the same
Mashele,
breath,
so
we
let
can
me bring in Prince Mashele
that
there.
what is happening now,
we've covered that point. Should we
Gupta
look at the Constitution and the powers of the President at the same time? I mean, is that a conversation that needs to be opened up here, considering under state capture what we saw were cabinet ministers just moved from post to post when anything went wrong?
Well, I don't think there's anything we can do about a president appointing ministers. In all mature democracies, that's how democracy works. Because if you don't give the powers to appoint, the president the power to appoint ministers, you can't blame him when government is not delivering.
You've got to assume he has the moral high ground, though.
Exactly. It's unfortunate that we had a president a compromised president like Jacob Zuma. But the assumption was that we're going to have a good president like Nelson Mandela who's going to act in the national interest. So we have to live with the flaws of presidents we get from time to time. That's how democracy works.
Let's leave it on that note. Prince Mashele, Lawson Naidu, Carl Niehaus, thank you very much. Still ahead, more on the state capture inquiry. Our reporter Erin Bates was there today. She joins me after this. This is Tonight with Jane Dutton.